Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's video tutorial. This will be the fourth video in the opening series based on the book by Grandmaster Liu Dianzhong. In the past few videos, the second and third video, we have already covered all these points, and today we will be going over the last few bots. I hope that you have enjoyed the video series, and I thank all for their positive comments about this video series, and I hope that the viewer can learn more about the fundamentals of Xiangqi opening theory as much as I have. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin our lessons. Okay, the ninth point would be to be wary of attacks from the central file or the center of the bot, or simply put, to be wary of the center. Now, the center of the bot in Xiangqi, we will need a definition. Now, according to the Grandmaster, the center of the bot will be the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh file, somewhere near the riverbank. He did not specify which area, but the area marked here would usually be referred to as the center of the bot. Now, when a piece or pieces at the center of the bot would be able to exert much more greater influence on the game. And for example, if red were to advance a horse or any other piece to the center, he would not be very far from the enemy king. And if one were able to position pieces at the center of the board, usually speaking, the defense of the player would be improved dramatically if done correctly. And being at the center board would allow for more versatility in the development of the various pieces, because you can continue down the center or go to one of the flanks as need be. Now, in the first example for this, there's only one example. The Grandmaster gave a very popular opening back in the 1950s in China. Central cannon and the single horse defense. Now, this opening was very popular back in the 1950s, but it is very seldom seen nowadays. The main reason is because the single horse defense, in the single horse defense, only one horse is protecting black central pawn, making it very vulnerable to attacks by red along the center of the board. Although if black continued to develop his pieces, he would usually get to link all his pieces up, and that would be called one particular variation is called Qi Bao Lian Su, or the seven treasured tree formation. However, as opening theory became more and more advanced, people noticed the center was not weak enough and was more susceptible to attacks, and black usually would have a hard time playing this variation, and hence that is why it's not seen anymore nowadays. So attacks along the center or pieces along the center will exert more influence, and you have to be careful of whatever the opponent might be preparing. So this is point number 9. Be wary of the center. The next point to take note of would be to pay attention to space on the board, or spatial orientation. Now, simply defined, the space that a piece can exert its influence on would be the intersections of the lines whereby it can be a threat to the enemy pieces. So for this example, the Grandmaster gave the example of a very commonly seen opening, the left cannon blockade counter for black. So red would start with the central cannon and push the pawn forward. If red continued to do so, instead of playing h2 plus 3, black would push his pawn, advance his cannon forward to form a blockade. Now, at this point in time, red's right flank would have limited space to move, and he would have a hard time maneuvering this chariot. And Black can continue with the double pawn rank cannons variation or counter with a deferred opposite direction cannon. Now this counter by black has been proven time over time to be a viable counter to red central cannon, and is still often seen in competition nowadays. And the key to its success or viability will be the concept that black would try to limit the space that red's right horse and chariot can move early in the game. So that's point number 10. Okay, the next point to take note of will be another very important thing to remember in the Xiangqi opening. That will be the order of the moves. Although some moves may seem to be you can play some moves interchangeably, but in Xiangqi, sometimes a slight change in order of the moves would result in very different outcomes. Now, for this example, the Grandmaster gave this situation, which would be orthodox up till this point in time. Red would use the central cannon, develop his right chariot as a foul chariot, both horses as proper horses, and then also have pushed one of the pawns forward, and black countered with the green horse defense and also protected his horse with a foul chariot. It will be black's turn to move. Now, usually black would consider to play either c8 plus 4 or c2 plus 4 to try to attempt the double cannons, double pawn ranks variation. However, if c8 plus 4 were played, if black pushed his pawn forward as similar to the left cannon blockade variation as seen earlier, red would immediately counter with c8 plus 2 for the riverbank cannon, and by doing so, black would not be able to push his other cannon across the river for the dreaded double pawn rank cannons variation. So, a few possible moves, and at this point in time, not only would black not been able to achieve his double pawn rank cannons, his right chariot would not be blocked or prevented from developing, because once the red horse can move, trading the pawns, there will be a lot of space. So the idea of limiting the space of red's right flank would also be defeated. Hence, in this position, the correct move to make would be c2 plus 4 to prevent red from pushing c8 plus 2. So once this is moved, if red tried to attack from the center, black would continue with the double pawn rank cannons variation. Now, this is one of the most dreaded counters that black can offer against red central cannon, and it's a very volatile situation whereby both players will go at it, and the margin of error is very small. Usually black would have quite an advantage in this situation, and red will be playing with a very cramped position. Hence, as can be seen, this situation and pushing c8 plus 4 first will result in a totally different setting or different situation on the board. Hence, the order of the moves to play cannot be overstated, and they must be made in the correct order. Now, for beginners, sometimes if you are still not familiar with a lot of opening variations, it will be best for you to try to memorize them as much as possible, and slowly appreciate the different results that would occur if you were to play the moves differently. The next topic to take note of would be to be sensitive enough to know when to attack and not jump the gun incessantly. For this topic, for this section, the Grandmaster gave one of the positions from a central cannon versus left river horse bank variation of the screen horse defense. Now, as a side note, the Grandmaster wrote a treatise on the left riverbank horse variation, and at this point in time it will be black's turn to move. So the following is a very good and short summary of what to do. And when this position is reached, it will be imperative it will be suggested that black play e3 plus 5. This would give black some defense, and so that he can continue attacking by pushing the pawn forward. Now, in the example, black jumped the gun and played p7 plus 1, threatening to capture the red chariot, and this will lead to very complicated situations. But doing so was too early. It was too early or too brash. So red would play r2 equals to 4, and after playing r2 equals to 4, red would have the significant advantage. So there were 3 variations that were given by the Grandmaster, who is expert on black in this situation. The first would be h6 plus 8 to try to capture the red horse. The second would be to capture the pawn directly, and the last would be to trade horses by charging the pawn forward. In the first variation, this is one of the usual lines that is seen and given in the books. Trade of horses, and red would take the initiative to capture the central pawn. Now, because the elephant was not present, red would be given a chance to gain a headhunter cannon. So this would be definitely to red's advantage. So black must capture it, but in doing so, black would lose material, and red would still have a very nice formation going on into the endgame stage of the into the mid game or endgame phase. So after r2 equals to 4, the second variation would be h6 plus 7, which is also quite commonly seen. The correct way, as suggested by the Grandmaster, would be r4 equals to 3, threatening to capture the riverbank pawn, and by moving the cannon over here, the black horse will be denied a chance to capture the central cannon or trade material. And if the black chariot moved to the rib file, red could easily play h7 plus 6, because now the horse will be protected by the cannon and it would target the chariot. So this horse would be in trouble, and black's chariot and cannon combination over here would not be able to do anything constructive. So advantage to red. In the third variation, charging the pawn forward, red would simply trade material, and again charge his horse to the river, preparing to capture black's central pawn and to gain a headhunter cannon, and also threaten to capture black's pawn. Now black's pawn would have moved 1, 2, 3, 4, so black would have spent 4 moves to move 1 pawn. So it would be a dilemma for black. And red would bide his time and choose to play r4 equals to 2, because once the cannon and chariot is pinned, this will be done at the expense of 1 chariot, but it will be a worthwhile bargain, and again the pawn will still be under attack. So black would not need to fear the pawn in this instance, because a solitary pawn will not be able to do much. So red will still have a considerable advantage going into the mid-game phase. So a short review. It will be important to know when to attack and when not to attack, and when sometimes it will be better to defend in the opening stage, especially towards the end of the opening phase. But usually for beginners, this might not be so easily, might not be so obvious, and but the more experience you gain, the more you'll be able to make correct and more accurate decisions. So be sensitive, know when to attack and when to defend. The last point that the Grandmaster pointed out was to be careful of the enemy sacrificing pawns to gain tempai. Now this point will be similar in concept to point number 5 that was mentioned last week. Now there were 2 examples given for this section, and this would be the first example. So red would have started with the horse opening and ended up with the screen horse defense. Black would have chose to develop his chariot very early. Now so far this situation is okay, it's orthodox, and there's not much to complain about. However, it will be red's turn to move. Now at this point it would seem to be normal or natural to play e3 plus 5. After all, red will consolidate his formation and be able to slowly develop his chariot later on. However, this would be a slight mistake, or red would demonstrate that he had not appreciated the possibility of black sacrificing a pawn to gain tempo. Now in a book, if e3 plus 5 were played, red could continue by sacrificing his pawn and forcing the and playing r9 equals to 3. Now if the elephant had not been moved, the cannon would have protected the horse, and red could have simply moved his pawn away to safety. So because e3 plus 5, although the idea was okay, red neglected the importance of keeping his cannon rank intact. So if r9 plus 3 are played, and as can be seen, at this point in time, the black chariot will now command a very strategic location on the board. Both the red chariots have not been developed, and there will be ample space for black to develop his right flank. And the next move, black would be prepared to play h3 plus 4 to gain some tempai, because the horse will not have any good place to move. Even if the red horse retreated h6 minus 8, black will simply push his chariot across, because this cannon would now be protected by the other cannon. So black could have gained some tempai and perhaps even seized the initiative from red. So what should red do in this situation? It was recommended by the Grandmaster that black, instead of playing h3 plus 5, h8 plus 9 to develop his left flank, or r1 plus 1 to develop his right chariot. As a ranked chariot would all be commonly seen variations with their pros and cons, but so far these would be considered orthodox. Now to the last example in the videos. This will be point number 13, as a continuation of sacrificing a pawn to gain tempai. Now this situation is quite commonly encountered. Red will be using the central cannon, black will be defending with the sandwich horse defense. Now it would be black's turn to move. So the red chariot was at black's pawn rank and was prepared to play r2 equals to 3. So how should black reply to this threat? Now in the example, black was brash and chose to charge his horse to the riverbank, because since red had not moved his left horse, black could move h6 plus 4 as a possibility and gain some momentum, hopefully. However, red would have neglected a possible sacrifice, pawn sacrifice by red. So if h6 plus 4 were played, e7, red would offer a pawn as a sacrifice, and red would threaten to capture the horse. So if black, at this point in time, black can only defend with h6 minus 5. If e3 plus 5 were played, red will simply apply a fork with r2 equals to 4 and gain material and probably win the game, since such a significant advantage was gained so early in the game. So h6 minus 5 would be the way to defend at this point in time, which red will trade away material. Red will not jump the gun and be prepared to capture the central pawn, because by developing his horse as an edge horse, black's pieces are not very well organized and very vulnerable to attack. The pawn, central pawn, it would just be a matter of time before the black central pawn fell. So a short review. At this point in time, it would be better for black to have defended or maybe move an advisor instead of pushing h7 plus 6, because if h7 plus 6 were played, red could sacrifice a pawn and further his tempo or advantage in the game, and this would be to red's advantage, obviously. So that ends our short video for the opening series. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have done, and I hope to hear some feedback from you. If there are any suggestions or any recommendations, please feel free to tell me. I'll be a little bit busy over the next few weeks, but I'll try to see what I can do. And if you like my channel, please subscribe, and I thank you and wish you a very happy weekend ahead.